So, today we're going to fresh crack the Teeling single grain Irish whiskey. Um, Single grain Irish whiskey. Of course, it's a little different. It's not single pot still. It's not single malt. It's single grain. What exact grains? 95% corn. It is 95% corn and 5% malted barley. It's 46% alcohol, 92 proof, and it is a Bacardi product. Yes, that's right. This is now a Bacardi product. A product of Bacardi. Apparently, they decided to take a majority stake in Teeling Irish whiskey. So it's a Bacardi product. But we're okay with Bacardi. Bacardi makes some good things when it comes to Scotch. So we're kind of okay with that. So this one is non-chill filtered, but is it natural color? You know, maybe. We are talking about 100% matured in Cabernet Sauvignon casks. So this is a red wine maturation. So that's like a pretty consistent color with a full red wine maturation, if I'm being honest. But they always do this funky thing with this brand where it says, where you think, oh, does this look like natural color? No, it's natural character. A bunch of people say this is natural color. I'm dubious that there's no coloring in it. I get the feeling there might be some. That being said, like, this coloration is not, you wouldn't call that, like, unearthly for a full red wine maturation. So, there's that. How does a single grain if it's 95% corn and 5% barley? Isn't that 2 grains? You're right. But what does single mean when we talk about single malt? So single malt doesn't mean it's a single grain, which is malt. It means it comes from a single distillery, which is malt. So single, in this case, single grain just means single distillery, grain whiskey. Yeah. So either something is single or it's blended. Column still, this one is column still, yeah. You might think that Teeling stuff would be pot still, but this one is in fact column still. Unlike, for example, their single pot still offering, or probably their single malt offering, but this particular one is column still. I don't know much more than that about the still. I know this is ex-California Cabernet Sauvignon. I didn't dig up the age. Like, what? How old do we think this is, as a guess? What are people guessing? It's not 15 years old. It's not 13 years old. It's probably like 10 years old. It's probably like 8 to 10 years old. That would be my guess. No, this says, actually this source from Difford's Guide says it's just under 6 years old. So this is like, it's technically 5 years old, but it could be, we'll call it 6. It's basically 6 years old. So 6 years old, 5 to 6, yeah. Yeah, we wish we knew for sure if this was E150, but meh. It's always that way with Teeling, it seems like. It seems like they have that thing on here that says natural character that looks real suspicious, and everyone seems to say, oh yes, it's natural color. Are you sure? It doesn't say that anywhere. Or the juice doesn't belong to Teeling? That's possible. So the thing with Teeling is when they first launched, they sourced everything from Cooley, I think. So it's quite possible that this is source grain. Let's look. Teeling grains source. What if we could find the distillery? That would be good. Um, I cannot. But initially, all the Teeling stuff was sourced. I think mostly from Cooley. And then they started doing their own thing, and now I think their malt whiskeys and single pot stills are probably their own juice at this point. They've been open long enough. But I don't know where this grain comes from. I couldn't tell you where it comes from. But I mean, there's a bunch of places they could source grain whiskey from. It would be Irish Irish distillery one way or another. I don't think that they have column stills at their distillery. So this is column still. So if it's column still, it's not their juice. But I don't know whose juice it is. It would have to be someone with a column still. Could be Cooley still. Does Cooley must have grain column still at their distillery, right? I don't know. But for example, Kilbeggan or anything like that, or even Middleton would have a way to produce grain whiskey. So it might be, well, it's sourced, but I don't know where it's sourced from. But it's still Irish grain whiskey one way or another. And since it says single grain, it does all come from the same one source to distillery, whichever one that is. I hate the corks on these, by the way. It popped really well for me, but it's like these little dinky like caps, man. It's so easy to rip this thing off. All right. Let's get spinning. Or not. There it goes. It looks like bourbon in the glass. I guess that would make some amount of sense. I hope this is good. It kind of does look like bourbon color. But I guess it is a bourbon mash bill, in theory. This is a mash bill you could call bourbon. It's just missing the new charred oak barrel and the whole United States thing. It's on the outside, is it? Or not? I don't know what that is. It's on the outside. So what is this? 40? It's 46% alcohol, right? Yeah. So it's not quite super duper low proof. So what are we expecting out of this? I'm not 100% sure. So it's not malt. So the character of the distillate is going to be grainier. It's not going to be like as malty. It's going to be more like a bourbon distillate. If you get much out of a bourbon distillate, sometimes you get like kind of like a buttery corn note or a bready cornbread kind of thing out of bourbon distillate. So it could have some of that. But it also is 100% red wine matured. So I wouldn't be surprised if it had some tannic notes, if it had some kind of like weird autumn leaves, pine cone kind of notes. That could be a thing too. What do they say? I feel like a lot of times they like write like red berries and stuff like that on here, which is like possible, but I don't get at all on the Lichig that we had. Hey Cap, how's it going? I want berries. Yeah. What does it say on here? What do they suggest here? Distinctive red berry and delicate spice character. That doesn't tell us very much. Kind of stressed. Is it work-related stress or is it like life-related stress? Sometimes work-related stress can be a good thing, unless it's like something dog shit. Both. Oof. Whiskey Arbiter. Am I an arbiter? What do you mean by that? Whiskey specialist? I don't know. I'm an enthusiast. I'll definitely self-describe as an enthusiast, but man, specialist? I don't know. I feel like there's people who know more than me, so it's hard to say I'm a specialist. That and I'm not like restricted exclusively to whiskey. I can go anywhere. We can do some rum. We can do some we can do some other crazy stuff too, like I don't know, gin or cognac or brandy or anything like that. Sorma, how's it going? Thanks for joining us anyway. Well, hopefully, Cap, things are moving in the right direction for you. Hopefully, it's temporary stressors. Love the content? Nice. Yeah, we do spirits related content about an hour every weekday. Um, Starting like usually like half an hour ago. I'm kind of like a little late today, but um, it is what it is. So we just cracked this one, the Teeling single grain Cabernet Sauvignon cask. We'll see what we get here. It's been sitting for a minute enough. We're going to ponder that for a minute while we read this. Federal funded state medical center and the new administration paused funding. Oh, that's messy. Oh, that's kind of messy. Oh, not to get too political, but I hope the politics are like, it's like, uh, it's like it would be even worse if it's politics you don't agree with, because there's something about like just it being politics in general is messy too. That's unfortunate. I mean, Donald Trump's been doing some wild things though. That's for sure. Um, and definitely it's controversial one way or another. But I guess the way I would put it is like, um, even if you're in a situation where like it's like you kind of like hate what's going on, you're getting good experience, and there's gonna be more demand for your work somewhere else. If you really like hate it, you'll find something better. I believe in you. But probably the easiest way out would be if it just everything kind of like worked itself out with no communication. Yeah, so it's kind of like one of those things where you're like not sure about your job security and stuff like that. That's like, yeah, that's actually the worst. Fucking get your resume started. All right, so the interesting thing about this, right off the rip, um, yep, it's ready. Look, you're 2 steps ahead. You're 2 steps ahead. So far, Okay, it's got a grainy note that is kind of like bourbon. Okay, so like there's like a bourbon distillate kind of corn note to it. Like, and I think it's actually really interesting. And I think you'll find this too, Bees Knees, that when you try this, right at first you're gonna get a note. It doesn't smell like bourbon, but you're gonna get a note that you're like, I know this. I know this note. And it's kind of like a corn grain kind of note. And you're like, I get this in bourbon, but I didn't know, maybe didn't know exactly what it was. Um, there's definitely a like a corn grain note um, that you get in bourbon. So that's like right off the rip. It's also one of the strongest characters too. But there is like there's like a tannic. There's like a tannic kind of note. I don't want to call it like red berry, but what is it? Um, it is kind of red berry, but it's not. Huh? It's a little different, kind of in a good way. Um, what's the best way I can describe this? It smells like a bitter red berry. So not like a fresh, luscious, juicy strawberry or like Swedish berries, fake red, gummy berry. It's kind of like a bitter berry, like uh, I don't know what kind of berry this is, but it would be like in my mind, it's like sometimes you go out in the woods and there's those like little red berries that you're not supposed to eat. I just imagine in my head that those are very bitter and don't taste good, and that's the berry I'm envisioning in my mind is like a very like unpalatable red berry. There's kind of like an underlying like caramel sweetness, which to me is very reminiscent of Canadian whiskey. Um, so kind of like where I'm at right now is kind of like there's like a corn based grain note. There's like this tannic kind of note. There's like bitter red berry, unpalatable berry note. And then there's like an undercurrent of like caramel, which is like very similar to the caramel notes you get in Canadian whiskey. And that would kind of make some amount of sense because Canadian whiskey, a lot of it is corn based. Like we were talking about the Pike Creek 10-year-old rum barrel finish, which is again, it's not a great whiskey, but it's cheap and tastes sweet. But it has like this kind of like a note I described as a Canadian whiskey note. It's just it tastes like sort of like Canadian whiskey. It's got a little bit of that on the nose, so it's like on the bottom. It's closer to caramel in this particular nose, but there's like a Canadian whiskey note in it. If I got this blind, I would be right up in like bargain at Canadian whiskeys. Almost guarantee it. All right, so we're gonna try this on the palate. We'll see what this red wine has done to the palate. We'll see if it tastes like pine cones. But the way that the nose is kind of like teasing me is gonna be a lot sweeter than like the Litchig. Not looking good. What it is very weird. It is very sweet. It is like so consistent. This like caramel sweet note that I would associate with Canadian whiskey is like through the whole thing. It's like as soon as it hits your tongue, mid palate, back palate, and it's all this like very sweet caramel, like Canadian whiskey kind of note. But it's kind of some funky stuff going on. I don't know what's going on in the palate. There is some weird kind of flavors that I'm gonna have to take a minute to try to pick apart. But in the finish, there is definitely like a tannic kind of like slightly bitter pine cone kind of thing. Like red wine tannic bitter on the finish that is like inside all of this like random luscious caramel note. So it's like kind of weird. Like part of the reason it's so hard to get understanding of the palate just on that one initial impression is that it's like everything is like thick caramel and there's like other things stuck inside the caramel. That's what it feels like. Unlike some of like the scotches we have where there's like a transition where we go like, hey, first I'm tasting smoke and then I'm tasting malt and then I'm tasting earth and vegetation and then we go to the finish. It's kind of like there's caramel the whole time, but there's some other weird stuff going on inside that. Huh. It's a different one. It's a different one. It's a little. I didn't expect any less, to be honest. My biggest worry is that it was maybe a little flat. And we will say, like, on the outset, it's not super duper, like, bursting with flavor, but it's 46% alcohol. Like, it's not light. It's not like we're getting it on the palate and we're really hunting. But I'm really surprised how sweet the nose is, considering this is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon maturation. Like, I really would think that there's like a refill bourbon in here or a bourbon of some. Or really, I want to say, how is there not a Canadian whiskey barrel in here? But, man, yeah, there is kind of a berry thing. I'm trying to see if I can get that same like bitter berry thing on the palate. Corn and Cali wine barrels made in Ireland is weird as shit. Yeah. There's definitely kind of like a bitter tannic note on the finish that is like to me like a call to red wine. This is a fresh crack. Yeah, I've never had this before. Um, but the palate is so sweet. Um, Again, it's a neck pour, so maybe maybe we could expect some more separation of flavors here. But the thing that's happening right now is it's just so thick and sweet on the palate that I'm having a hard time getting into like the wine notes that I expect to be there, and I kind of get like whispers of. I kind of get like some whispers of these tannic, bitter notes. Maybe like some of these berry kind of notes, but I feel like I'm like trying to peel back like thick layers of caramel to try to find them. Um, like they're right there on the nose. So sweetness is that caramel flavor. Yeah, it's like a Canadian whiskey caramel. Like it's a very soft, luscious, kind of like creamy. I think that's a good word. It's like a creamy Canadian whiskey kind of caramel. Um, and it's really just like, I want to say, like pushing out any other kind of notes. Like it's really like heavy handed almost, um, to try to get the barrel out of here. But what's surprising to me is that, like, none of that sweetened caramel stuff would be from the barrel, right? Because the barrel is Cabernet Sauvignon. It's not bourbon. It's not ex-bourbon. It's not like a refill Canadian whiskey barrel. So that means that all of that sweet vanilla, sweet caramel has to come from the distillate, right? Where else would it come from? It's not coming from the barrel. Unless that barrel was shaved. I don't. It doesn't talk about the barrel being shaved. Like it's not STR. So I don't know if the barrel was like re-toasted or something. Very dry and tannic. Yeah, there is that, right? There is a tannic presence. There is like a bitter red. You do get like a red fruit that to me is coming across bitter. But it's really hard to. It's really hard to get more on the palate. It's like it's more on the finish than on the palate. The best way I can describe it is it feels like the caramel has a bitter element. Instead of it being like, oh, there's like a bitter red berry note or like a tannic note, it kind of feels like the caramel note is kind of like got a weird kind of bitter character. And then as soon as you get into the finish, you do get like a tannic note right at like the near the start of the finish, but then it's like all caramel again. Like it's actually quite tasty. Like it's easy to drink and very sweet. But the most interesting part about it, like the Cabernet Sauvignon barrel, it's almost not getting enough voice. That's kind of like what I would say. It is you can tell that it's a little different. Like it's not like just straight Canadian whiskey. It's not like I'm drinking Canadian whiskey, but it's not like the barrel's not like loud enough right now for me that I feel satisfied with the like wine maturation. You know what I mean? Like I'm worried that if this was single malt in Cabernet Sauvignon, it would have been a better whiskey. Because somehow the like the grain character, the overwhelming grain notes are like stealing the show. I spent the whole 5 years in the cab barrel, as far as I understand. Yeah, and that's what the website says too. Um, and that's kind of like my brain's going in the same place, right? Like, is this ex bourbon finished in Cabernet Sauvignon, right? Because that's kind of what it feels like. But like, for example, it says here, Um, 95 corn, 5% malted barley, column still, matured exclusively in American red wine. Highly distinct red berry tannic profile. Um, so they say distinct red grape and berry with a hint of spice. I'm having a hard time finding the hint of spice. Underlying sweetness. So the way I'm experiencing that is different than what's read here is like we're swapping this around. Like it feels like distinct caramel sweetness profile with maybe a hint of spice and an underlying a red berry profile, red berry and tannic profile. That's kind of like what I'm getting. Red grape berry spice sweet. Like this is like I wouldn't call it grape. Well, if I've been suggested grape, it kind of feels maybe it could be grape. But this is definitely on like red berry, sweet, like corn. I'm not getting spice really. And that's kind of funny because half the time you get spice in like every whiskey, so it's kind of like, what do you mean there's no spice in it? It's not really, I don't know, maybe I had too many bourbons recently, but it's not that spicy. Smooth, spice, berry, unique, tannic, short, dry. Would I call a finish short? Yeah. Maybe short plus. It's not quite medium, but it's a longer short. It is tannic on the finish. That's kind of what I said already. I agree. Like I'm down with this, and I'm kind of down with this. This is kind of like, you know, smooth spice berry. What does smooth mean? It is triple distilled. It does have a good mouthfeel. But it's kind of like, to me, it's coming across very sweet caramels, with like some just shadows of these kind of tannic berry notes. There, it feels like you get that sweet character, but you're like chasing at where the red wine barrel is on the palate. All in all, that being said, it tastes good. Like it doesn't taste bad. It's just not, it's not as complex and funky as I was hoping. It is a little funky. It is a little different. There is like a good amount of, I haven't ever experienced something like this before. We'll put it that way. But it's not as tannic red wine as like, it's not like this one, right? Where we had the 9 years Bordeaux one, where like, yeah, this is malt, and it's got peat in it, and it's, but what it like, but it doesn't have like this tannic pine cone, random lime. I didn't expect to get lime again. Lime, I think, is maybe just unique to this bottle, but the like autumn leaves bitter pine cone thing that's like really front and center. It's not that. It's more sweet caramels with sort of these red wine barrel undertones. That's kind of what it feels like. We'll see if, I know you have this bottle, two Beasties. We'll see if you agree. But I don't know if it's because this is grain and this is malt, or if Bordeaux red wine is just so much stronger than California red wine, or if it's like the age, like this is 9 years, right, and this is 5, and maybe 5 is like not quite long enough to get like the most tannic aspects of the barrel. And I'm talking like this thing doesn't taste good. It's not that it doesn't. It's not that it doesn't taste good. It's just that like we approach this with the idea that like, hey, we're gonna go on a funky adventure, and it's like sort of funky. It's not like a complete wild adventure where we're getting like kind of crazy wine notes out of it. So all in all, we'll give it like 3.5 red banks out of 5. It didn't fail to deliver. It just didn't deliver enough. I think that's the way we put it.